I want to thank everyone for joining us today. My name is Alon Shalev. I'm the Executive Director of American Friends of Hand in Hand. We're a network of bilingual schools in 6 Israeli regions and cities with over 2,000 students and supporting a community of 10,000 strong, which includes parents, teachers, community outreach participants, and of course our alumni, 2 of whom you're going to meet shortly.
Hi, everyone. I'm very excited to see you all here and to talk to you. So my name is Bar. I'm 26 years old from Israel, talking to you from my house in the desert. But actually, I grew up in the central north part of Israel, in an area called Wadi Ara. And I had the privilege to study at Hand in Hand School of Wadi Ara for 6 years. I graduated 14 years ago, but still here. Yeah, I'll share with you some of my stories. So I remember when I was on 6th grade, it was my last year at Hand in Hand School. I got a task in class to interview someone for my family. So immediately I knew I wanted to interview my grandma, since she was the best storyteller I knew. I used to hear her story about how she survived the Holocaust 100 of times before. So I went to visit her in her beautiful house in the kibbutz in the north of Israel, the most beautiful kibbutz. You can see all the surrounding, and Lebanon and Syria. She welcomed me with warm hug and my favorite apple pie she makes. And once again, she showed me on the world map the road of how she escaped throughout the war. She was 4 years old when the war started. Very soon, she lost her 2 parents. And she was lucky to be adopted by her uncle. And together they joined the partisans and ran through the forest the whole war. And this is how she survived. And at that interview, I wanted to ask her something I never asked before, which is, how was it when the war was ended? And I remember she told me how they came back to Sarajevo, her hometown is in Yugoslavia. And I remember mostly that she told me how she had this hope to find her parents. And she kept hoping seeing them around, every corner. And she kept hoping that for years after. And a few years later, they came to Israel and established a big, beautiful house and big family. And I remember she concluded that interview with what she used to say to us at every family occasion, which is, war is the worst thing that can happen. And being a refugee is the worst thing that can happen. And we should never allow anyone to experience something like this again. And I think this is why she also so proud of me, being part of Hand in Hand and being here with you today. So unlike my grandma, I had a really, really beautiful childhood growing up in Hand. I loved going to school. I would never forget my first day at school. It was my first day of my 1st grade, and it was the very first year of the School of Hand in Hand in Wadi Ara. And I remember all the families, the parents, the children, and the teachers together in the schoolyard, writing wishes and notes and tying it up to balloons. And all together we flew it up to the sky. And I can really remember this moment of me, 6 years old Bar, standing in the yard and looking at the sky and at the balloon and feeling so excited, as if like I'm really part of something big and something meaningful. And I could really feel this sense of, we are changing the world. And I think this feeling kept going with me for years after being in school. And Kfar Kara, it's the Arab town where the school is located, really became my second hometown from that moment and on. I felt really comfortable there, and it's really unusual for Jewish Israelis to feel comfortable at an Arab village, also for me and also for my family. But growing up there, the reality around us and the conflict, it did penetrated our reality in school, and we weren't blind to it, and we didn't avoid talking about it. I remember at 4th grade, there was one of the wars in Gaza. And one day we came to school and the teachers told us to sit in a circle. And this is how I had my first dialogue session ever at 10 years old. The atmosphere was very tense, and you can imagine how complicated is it for kids to do it, because us, the Jewish kids, we had relatives in Gaza, and the Palestinian kids had relatives, we had relatives in the army, and the Palestinian kids had relatives in Gaza. So you can imagine how complicated is it and how emotional is it for kids to talk about this stuff. But we did. And the next morning we get up and we come back to class, because this is what we do and this is our daily life. And I think this is how from really young age in hand we learn how to accept that there is a different stories than ours, and to accept different feelings and hold this pain together. And I think only when I grew older and graduated from hand in hand and went to a segregated Jewish school, I understood how unusual was this way, how I grew up. One of the moments I won't forget is when I was 16, I was on bus to school, to high school. Again, there was like a tense time in the area, and few kids were sitting in the back. The driver, who was Arab, was talking on the phone. And I heard those kids in the back starting to whisper between themselves. I'm sure this driver is talking to his terrorist friends. They're planning the next terror attack. And they were so scared, but also made fun of him. And I sat there, silent, and I knew Arabic since I studied in hand, and I could understand the actual conversation of the driver. And he was actually talking to his wife, the most adorable conversation, something like, you hang up first, no, you hang up first. And I think this moment sums it all up. Since, it's just unbelievable reality we're living at, where only, this barrier for the language creates so much fear and so much hatred and stereotypes. And this moment also made me feel my power as an alumni, because I could understand the actual situation and see the driver as a human being he is, and not being controlled by the fear we are fed here. And it is so powerful to be alumni of hand in hand. I started to attend hand in hand alumni conventions on high school. I remember the first time, again, stepping into a room full with youngsters like I, with similar opinions and similar point of view that can relate to these stories I'm telling you. And again, I felt this feeling of me in first grade, feeling part of something big and powerful, and that we can change. In one of those meetings already on my 20s, I met another alumna from a Jerusalem school. She's a good friend of Sally. She will tell you about her as well. Her name is Vicky. She's an Arab Palestinian. And we had a really nice chat. And then I asked her where she's from, where her family came from. And she said that they originally comes from the north. And I was excited because also my grandma comes from the north, like I told you before. So I asked her where from. And then she told me Bir'am. And at that moment, I had like a punch in my belly, since I know this place very good. It's actually ruins of an old Arab village right next to my grandma kibbutz. And Vicky told me how back in the war of 1948, the Israeli army expelled in a very violent way her grandma with little children from her house, and then ruined the village. And she became a refugee, just like my grandma did. So I could really relate to her pain and to her family story. But the truth is that it was also very challenging for me to hear this story, since it's the first time my own family narrative was really challenged. Since the story I grew up on is the story of how my grandparents established this beautiful kibbutz. But talking to Vicky, I realized how my grandma, after being a refugee, found her home in the place where Vicky's grandma lost her home. And it's just so complicated. There is no other word to put it's so complicated, but I think the skills I got from Hand in Hand and Vicky got from Hand in Hand allowed us to have this conversation and hold the pain together and understand each other, even though we have such different narratives. And I think, especially for Jewish Israelis, it's so hard for us to acknowledge these other narratives that challenge our own existence here in Israel. And I feel it's so important to do that, because only when we acknowledge the pain of the other, we can build something together and we can make peace. And both me and Vicky agreed that both our grandmas so proud of us being in hand and building a different future than what they experienced. And the craziest thing is that now my grandma doesn't live there anymore. Since the 7th of October, she was evacuated from the kibbutz, since it's a war zone now. Now she lives in a hotel room. And I'll tell you the truth, I'm afraid that she won't have the chance to come back to her house. And it's really hard, to see her a refugee again and losing her home again. But she won't allow me to tell it to you, because she don't see herself as a refugee, and she's very, very strong. And actually, a few weeks ago, in the Holocaust Memorial Day in Israel, I heard her telling her story once again in a room full with people and family. And when she finished her story, she looked up at the crowd and she told them, I'm optimistic. We all should be optimistic. Look at me, how I built my life after such a disaster. We will also build a better future. And then she asked everyone to sing a song for peace. And I was so proud of her at that moment, and so inspired by her powers and hopes for the future. And I think she, and also being involved with Hand in Hand, this is what gives me the power at those complicated days. And I just finish up with some anecdotes. So, you know how on school walls they used to write these cliches? So of course we also had one at my Hand in Hand school. It was, "Be the change you want to see in the world," by Gandhi. We wrote it on our own on the school wall that faced the main road of the village. And I still, every time I pass there, I look up to see the sentence, even now when it's all wiped out since they moved the building, just to get this reminder. And actually, I think, however kitsch it will be to say it, in our case, I think it's true. I think we are making the change I want to see in the world in Hand. We are making the peace between us. We are doing an example of how Jewish and Palestinians can live together in Israel. And it truly gives me hope to the future. And I really believe it will grow bigger, and more people will be able to tell you experiences like me and Sally have. And that's my story. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for being here. I'm so excited. And I just need a moment to just... my name is Sally and I'm 24 years old. I have started my journey at the Hand in Hand at age of 3. I have joined the Jerusalem school of Hand in Hand. So I started at age of 3 till high school graduation, which means 15 years in Hand in Hand. And I want to take you back with me when I was 7 years old, stepping on a dance floor. I still remember the outfit that day. I loved dancing. I was preparing for that dance for so long. It was on a school event on that day. That's all the picture from that day. And he didn't like the idea of seeing me dancing. He told my mom that I had to stop. That comes from a very traditional Muslim family, where it's not acceptable for girls to be dance. So my dad is from the West Bank and my mom is an Arab citizen of Israel. And that actually means that the only place they are able to live together as partners, building family and having kids, having me, is Jerusalem. And that's where I grew up. So later on, my parents split up, and my mom had to raise us alone. And she had to work very hard, cleaning houses and in supermarkets. And I remember helping her a lot. And I remember my first job. I was selling flowers. But within all the struggle, hand-in-hand school was always supportive. I got scholarships, tuition, free extra classes when I needed, and I felt safe. And I felt how it is to be seen. And my mom, with all her hard work, she's my role model. I remember we had fun as kids. She used to take us to the parks, and even though she returned home after a hard work day. And the hand-in-hand community was always part of our lives. I remember Christmas at Vicky's, my Christian friend, the same Vicky that Bar was talking about. Vicky used to invite me to her place for the tree decoration, and she used to bring me the Santa chocolate to school every Christmas. And I remember Hanukkah at Emmanuel's, my Jewish friend. He used to invite all the class, the students, the parents, the siblings. We all come together, and each and every one of us had to bring something to eat. So after eating, we used to lit the candles and do the blessing. And you can guess what? I was the one who was responsible for doing the blessing year by year till I mastered it. And I also remember doing the ambulance course that Hand in Hand provided at high school. And that actually inspired me going to the medical field. And you know, even when things went hard, we never run away from hard things. We talk about it. We had dialogues. We sat together. We speak to one another. We shared the feelings. We talk about what we feel. So all of us was feeling safe. I was feeling safe. I felt safe. And I remember one teacher. Her name is Brenda. I used to carry her books to class. Brenda was my English teacher. Yes, English is so hard. But Brenda didn't give up on me. And she stayed late after school, giving me free extra classes, making sure I'm passing my exams successfully. And look at me now. Here right now, talking in English in front of English speakers. So yes, Brenda, I owe you this. And I remember, and school also gave me the chance to fly for the first time. I remember I had the chance to fly for the first time getting on an airplane. I was 16 years old, and I went with my teacher Efrat and my friend Lior. We went to Germany in order to meet people and to meet students and speak about school, share what we do and how special we were. And all I was dreaming about since I knew I'm getting on an airplane was the sky picture from the window, the airplane window. I was really waiting for that moment. But when we got to the airport, they separated me from Efrat and Lior. And that was because I'm an Arab. But Efrat didn't allow that to happen. And she stayed with me. So they held me for 3 hours and they questioned me. And I was scared. I didn't know what they want from me. So question me nonstop. And the security at the airport asked me to take off my coat, even though it was on a really freezing January day. They actually took all my personal objects. They took my wallet, they took my hand watch. They took everything. including my phone. So I wasn't able to take that picture. And I felt humiliated. But that wasn't the last time for me experiencing racism. It's part of my experience as a Palestinian in Israel. But Hand in Hand taught me that no one is better than me, and I'm never less, and that we are all equal. And I'm taking this me wherever I go. So the values that I have, the Hand in Hand have taught me is still with me as an alumni today. So I finished high school. I graduated from the Hand in Hand Jerusalem High School, and I went to Ukraine to complete my dentistry degree. So I graduated from the Hand in Hand High School, and I went to Ukraine to continue my dentistry degree. Yes, Brenda was so proud of me, knowing that all her hard work was worth it. And I have completed my studies in English. And without Brenda, I wouldn't do that. I actually met Brenda a few months ago next to my house at the supermarket. And I was really grateful to her by believing in me and seeing much more beyond. So I finished my studies, I finished my dentistry degree, and I came back to my country. And I was looking for a job. And it was hard for me to find a job. So I ended up finding one working in a settlement with the ultra-Orthodox people, which is Haredim. And even though I've never spent time with them, I accepted them. Because these are the values that I've been taught in hand, to accept and respect the other. I felt after coming back to my country and moving around in Israel, as a Palestinian, it was hard for me. I felt that people doesn't really want to know how I feel. So I just had to keep it to myself. I had to hide myself. I felt that in my job, I'm a dentist, not beyond. So I just had to keep my feeling for myself. I remember last Hanukkah, I was sitting in my room. I was working on that. I was working on that day and on at the ultra-Orthodox clinic. And I heard the staff doing the blessing in the reception. And I was sitting in my room next to my assistant, and they started doing the blessing, and I was whispering to myself and just continue to do the blessing with them. So I was starting singing, and the assistant was freezing. She was shocked. She didn't understand what she heard a few minutes ago. And she was like, how do you know that? Who taught you this? And I just looked at her and I told her, Emmanuel. I did that at Emmanuel's. And since the October 7th, this is the only place I want to be at. This is where I feel I can be myself. And right now, I'm still part of the alumni of Hand in Hand. And what I'm doing now is helping gathering all the database of the alumni of Hand in Hand in order to continue our mission and continue the journey that we started and Hand in Hand. And as Alon said before, we're talking about thousands of alumni. And I wouldn't be who I am without school. I wouldn't be who I am without school. So the values that have been taught in Hand. So yes, we all come together and we speak about values. And I know I may think this and I may think that, and we all have different views, but what we are all agreeing about are the values. That everyone deserves security and everyone deserves equality. And we all want to live in peace. And yes, there is no peace right now, and it is far from us. But we can What we're all doing is coming together and still like continue connect to one another, even in tough times. So we come together and we talk to one another as human. And that's a skill that Israel needs. That's a skill that Palestinian and Jewish need. So the values that have been taught in hand by listening to one another, by understanding the pain and the anger, by respecting, talking, sharing the feelings, make me the person who I am today. And yes, I still remember my 7 years old, how much I loved to dance. And the feeling of being stopped from doing that, she's still with me now. But with all the support along my way, I can truly say that I'm free and I'm equal and I'm so powerful. And I'm the bridge that no one can break. Thank you everyone for listening.